There's no real good way to begin this, is there?
It's another episode of Why Are We Watching New Movies?
That's a better title for the show.
Yeah.
Can movie theaters just die? That's the question we
Well,
can
they
ask
probably
ourselves.
will if this is what they have to offer.
Yeah, well, and HBO Max along with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So what are we talking about today, Nate?
Matt, we are here to talk about the new movie Those Who Wish Me Dead by Taylor Sheridan, and that is the reason why I chose to have us, or suggested us do this movie.
How dare you?
I am going to begin with an apology.
Well, I feel like there's an obvious joke related to that title, but I'll just kind of bypass that.
Okay. Well, yes, so this is not a good movie, is it?
No, it's just bad. It's just a bad film. And you mentioned Taylor Sheridan. I've been a fan of his work in the past. Think about Sicario, Hell or High Water. I mean,
Wind River was another one.
yeah, really strong voice that seemed to kind of emerge in the past few years. And this feels like he's kind of become a brand in a way. I mean, Yellowstone's tremendously popular. He's one of the co-writers here. Of course, he directed this. But it just feels like he has too many pokers in the fire, too many projects going on, and it seems like the quality is going down for him.
I would not have given this a second look if it wasn't for the fact that his name was associated with it.
Yeah.
So Angelina Jolie's in it, and I was thinking as I was watching it, didn't she start with doing these kinds of movies, like The Bone Collector? I never saw that, but
yeah, Beyond Borders, kind of more dramatic.
Well, and just like kind of crime movies and
Sure.
stuff like that. I remember like in the
Taking
late
Lives.
90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, late 90s, she was in these weird, there was like this, and this does feel like it's trying to be something that would have come out in the 90s. I guess we're in the 90s nostalgia phase.
Maybe.
But I just remember thinking like, okay, you started with these movies, Angelina Jolie, and then you win an Oscar and you become whatever. And then it's all of a sudden like, you don't do these movies anymore, but you're back to them. And I don't know why.
Yeah, maybe she's trying to return to her roots, I guess. I don't know. So the general concept here is Jolie plays Hannah, I think is her character's name. She's a smoke jumper or a forest firefighter.
Whose specific job is that she is called to like parachute in
Yeah.
to the fire.
The film establishes right away that she had a traumatic event on the job.
The whole damaged backstory thing, that's, I think, my first problem with this movie because it's so generic.
Yeah, it feels very, very stereotypical, right?
Yeah, and it's also they immediately like let her off the hook. She's talking, like, oh, I read I read the wind wrong, and then the guy's like, we all read the wind wrong,
It's
so
not your fault. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking this could have been so much easier with just a few different tweaks. So instead of it being that, it's just an unfortunate accident, have it be that, she showed up drunk or whatever. She was drinking and then she comes to fight and she's not really, and you create like, oh, there's something she needs to redeem because the movie is clearly trying to have it. Now this other situation develops where we have our young boy whose dad is being hunted by super assassins.
I kept thinking of Chris Rock and Morgan Freeman and Nurse Betty.
And you didn't off anybody, buddy. You scalped him.
During their scenes. They always seem to teeter on absurd kind of black comedy at points, but...
Well, and so this is the main thrust of the movie is really the two guys trying to hunt down and kill this man who's an accountant. Yeah. And then his son is also implicated because his son was with him, and so son survives the attack, right?
Yeah, somehow his dad is exposed wrongdoings of some very powerful people, right? Politicians. It's not really gone into in detail.
And yeah, it's so generic. I mean, I guess this should have been called generic. Even the title's just generic, It's like sounds like generic action movie. And I think to myself, why? Like, why does this movie exist? Who was it made for? I can't figure that out.
I think it's meant to be a forest fire action film, ultimately, right? With a dramatic kind of through line.
Forest fires in the news, so...
Yeah, I think it's probably as simple as that. And, well, Angelina Jolie, I think she's a good actress. I think she's very talented, but she's not right for this role.
I mean, she is a good actress. I actually really kind of always been a fan of hers.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a problem, and it's a little unfair because she is obviously like supermodel looks, right?
Yeah.
And supermodels don't typically become firefighters. They typically become supermodels. And so that's where you kind of go, it's a little hard to kind of take her seriously.
They're
than her.
lugging, 100 pounds of equipment or whatever it is. There's a certain physicality you would think that this role would require. And she's done action films before. I mean, you think about Salt and you think about some of the roles that she has, I think, been quite good in. But as kind of a gruff, sort of wilderness type firefighter, it's a tough sell, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess let's get into the plot a little more. We set the premise, firefighter damaged, assassins that are hunting down boy who survived attack on his dad. I guess it's so ill-defined. What's the threat? What happened? Who are they working for? I guess at some point we meet Tyler Perry, who's playing, I don't know, it sounds like he's a middleman even. I don't really get the sense he's the real boss from that scene.
Yeah, exactly. He seems like the guy that these government officials have hired to take care of this problem, right? And he's not the grunt. The assassins are the grunts, and they seem like ex-military, especially Nicholas Holt's character.
Yes, I look at them, and this is the problem, because you want to establish your villains as being really a threat. And they do that. They right away, they come in, they clearly have no morals. They kill this family of this DA in Florida.
Yep.
They blow up they blow up the house to make it look like it's a gas line explosion. So you see this like hyper competent, and then they can like hack every known device to figure out where these people are and learn everything. And all of a sudden they start becoming morons. Like they just make stupid decisions.
Yeah.
They don't kill the wife of the sheriff, where you would think they would, because they're just like, I mean, they even say, I think, a line like, anybody who sees our face, they're just gonna have to get killed now, And then they continuously don't do that. I mean, it's just
at a certain point, one of them says, it's like he draws the line at killing a pregnant woman. So that character is pregnant, and she's the wife.
But can I just say that was like unintentionally hilarious. She is obviously pregnant. I mean, we see her earlier. The wife of the sheriff has this big baby bump.
Yeah.
And he like comes in, he throws her around, and then he's like, brother's like, and whispers in his ear, and then he's like, "Are you pregnant?" Like, I just laughed. I was like, that was the legit laugh I got out of this movie.
So John Barenthal's character plays a sheriff, and this is his wife, right? He's kind of caught up in this whole incident, right? And yeah, it just becomes kind of a cat and mouse game. And at this point, it's really hard to care about the characters. The characters are not fleshed out. Editing this is going to be a joy. So it feels very cliched too, just the whole idea of a character finding redemption through a small child, right? Or protecting a child. You think of
like that scene where
Wolf
he's
and
like,
Cub or,
my mom died too. It's like this poor kid's had like a miserable life.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's like signaling to you as obvious as possible, like, you will become his new mom, Angelina Jolie.
I'm surprised that wasn't in the film at the very end. Like, oh, I'll take care of you. I was expecting that.
It was pretty close to it, though.
Pretty close to it. But I do want to talk about just the look of this movie and the visual effects in particular. There's a lot of visual effects in this film, a lot more than I expected. Of course, fire, very hard thing to control. You really need digital effects to do that on a large scale. They're not going to burn up a real forest.
And there's this weird scene where they're running through open field and there's a lightning storm.
That was really goofy.
And she gets struck by lightning, and I'm just like, I've never been struck by lightning. I know actually a couple of people who have, though.
Yeah.
You don't just continue on like nothing happened.
You don't just get up.
It hurts. It can kill you.
It happens a couple times in this film where lightning is almost like treated like a monster.
Yeah.
Where there's no rain, there's no thunderstorm, just lightning shows up randomly. There's that scene where she's in the tower and the lightning hits the tower and she falls a long ways,
20 feet,
right on her back.
Yeah.
Like she would have broken her back. She probably would have died, from that fall. And then, that scene running through the field was, I laughed during that part because it was like they were under artillery fire or something. There were sparks flying and these lightning strikes were just randomly happening multiple times in a very small area. It was bizarre. It was very bizarre, and it felt like, okay, the film needs an action sequence now, or something exciting needs to happen.
And it didn't. I mean, I think that's the part. It's such a weirdly plotted movie because it didn't really feel like you needed. you really want to kind of establish maybe bad guys do bad thing, show that they're really serious, show them to be hyper competent, to keep getting closer and closer and closer till you're going to have that eventual dramatic
Yeah.
confrontation in the climax, right? And maybe you have to have them kill a good friend along the way. They probably should have had them kill the sheriff, because then it's like, oh my gosh, it's even more intense now because they
Yeah.
killed someone, right?
Yeah.
But they don't do any of those things. Instead, they have weird lightning strike scene and very unfortunate special effects, I would say.
Yeah, and the fire at a certain point like chases Angelina Jolie and this kid. All of a sudden, again, it becomes like this almost monster force that's going after them. Very strange. And it was very obvious to me, too, that this fire tower was largely a digital effect, right? So any of the wide shots that showed really the whole tower looked very... I was getting Star Wars prequel vibes at times. It just looked very gauzy and very, very digital. And it's clearly they just built a set, probably a few feet off the ground of this tower with a green screen behind it, or maybe they used the volume like on The Mandalorian or something to project the what was outside the windows. It just felt very artificial and very controlled, and the lighting was too perfect. There's always that catch-22 with shooting outside in the woods at night, where you have to have a light source of some kind, and it always ends up looking artificial. And
I mean, when they had the fire, I kind of liked how they did some of the lighting with the fire.
Yeah, that worked.
Because that makes sense, and that
Yeah.
it kind of always gives you the threat of something encroaching. But
Yeah.
when you get to the fire as monster that has a will of its own that sort of acts like a character, it's a little hard.
Yeah, and I understand these are challenging things to do practically, and I get that. But I did feel like there was quite a bit you could have done practically in this movie that would have made it more gritty, more convincing, and I think this movie needed that.
Everything I can practically, and when they asked me how am I going to recreate the fire, I said, well, I'm going to go out in the desert and I'm going to build a 300-acre forest and I'm going to set it on fire.
I was thinking as I was watching this, because obviously it's coming out here in 2021. It's being dual released with theater and HBO Max.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things. I don't know when the original plan was to release it, if it got pushed back or if this was always the intention, because I thought as I was watching it, I go, is this a product of, as you said, Taylor Sheridan has maybe too many projects going that he's not giving proper attention to any one of them? Or is it also I was thinking maybe the result of the fact that it was the pandemic, that they started this, they kind of got it greenlit, or they were already shooting and then they had to cancel production and they like, oh, we already put money into this and we need to go and finish it up, but they reapproached all the shot it.
Yeah.
But I looked it up. Everything was shot in 2019.
Okay.
And so it obviously got shelved for a long time. Now, maybe because post-production, people were just in shutdowns or couldn't get around to do some of the post-production work that you needed to do on it. But it struck me the entire time as I was watching, like they didn't ever really get not only the script, but even the way they shot the movie. I felt like this was just a real quick cash grab almost. That's the only reason I can think of it being made, that everyone's like, let's get some money out of this so that we can then go do other things. I don't know.
Yeah, it just...
And A-list talent. I mean, we talked about Angelina Jolie, but John Bernthal, you said, is also in this. He's a pretty promising actor and gets a lot of good work. Aidan Gillen, who was Game of Thrones, and he always just plays the bad guy, I guess.
Typically,
I mean, he's again like the kind of guy you want for this part. I mean, you have Nicholas Hoult. He's one of the more promising young actors. So I'm just thinking, he attracted so much talent.
I think
nothing.
Well, I think it was Taylor Sheridan. His name being attached to it is what brought in these big names, and unfortunately, it's just a very thin project.
So Matt, is Those Who Wish, I can never remember the title, is Those Who Wish Me Dead worth it?
No, I don't think so. No surprise there. It's disappointing on many levels. Coming from Taylor Sheridan, he seems to be the specialist in wilderness dramas, I guess, if you wanted to categorize him in a way, and I would expect more from him. I think there's a potential for an interesting story here, just the idea of a thriller set in this world, I think is not a bad concept, but the execution here is poor.
I would agree. I think even if you have your HBO Max subscription already, you don't have to bother watching this on it, right?
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting because it does seem like all of the story elements are there for what he's done in the past, but nothing comes together in any meaningful or substantive way. So definitely skip it.